Hi guys. Are you being the best version, most highest version of yourself? The version of you that knows your desires are already done and that you're just lining up with them by training your thoughts? Are you being that version? And we're not always being that version. I know I'm not always being that version. Some days I feel sluggish or I feel negative or I'm just off my routine, we're not always going to feel like that person, right? We're not always going to feel like that version of ourselves that knows for sure everything's done and we're just lining up our thoughts and we're positive about it and we're trusting, we're not always going to be trusting. We're going to have off days. And, I always just, when I have an off day, I just accept it, and maybe it's just like an off couple hours. It doesn't have to be a whole day, but whatever it is, just accepting it really helps kind of move through it. And I also say to myself, like, I'm not always like this. I don't always feel like this. So I almost cherish it or value it a little bit more if I don't always feel that way. And I think that kind of helps kind of release it a little bit, not be so attached to feeling bad or negative or whatever. And then of course, like, just reminding yourself, and if you can't even do that, if you can't even remind yourself to be the best, most highest version of yourself, then don't push it. I would just say, just relax, turn your phone off, give yourself some self-love, kind of do something else, right? But we're trying to always bring it back to being the highest, best version of ourselves. And trust me, if that's your goal, you're always going to get back there. You don't have to worry about, going too far off, because you're going to remind yourself and you're going to always be back there. Because Neville doesn't ever say we have to be perfect, right? We're going to go in and out of states all the time. We just want to be bringing ourselves back to that state of knowing we're the highest, best version of ourselves and knowing our stuff is already done and we're just lining up with it with our thoughts, like easy peasy. So and I wanted to say too that manifesting is such it's a way for us to be internally validating ourselves instead of externally validating ourselves, right? Like, it actually gets us in the mode of this, and we're kind of like learning this our whole lives, right? But manifestation really propels us into that way of being where we have to rely on our internal validation and trusting our internal senses and our internal thoughts, right? We're not looking for external validation. So it actually like brings it all home and really allows us to focus internally and really validate ourselves internally without external validation. And we're kind of always taught this, right? Like in school, you don't want to look for love outside of yourself. You want to give it to yourself. Like, there's always mentors that are always telling us this, right? Like, if we have anyone in our lives kind of reinforcing that idea. And really, manifestation takes this to another level where you literally only have your internal validation. So a really good affirmation of the fact that we're not getting validation from our external world at all. It's just a thought I had today. It was just like, wow, this is like a really, like, the best way to learn this lesson, right? It's just like by creating your own life with manifestation and knowing that the only thing you actually ever have is your internal validation during this process, right? So it really gets you to rely on that and trust in that, right? So so the thing that we're talking about today was kind of like an epiphany that I had the other day while I was during a conversation that I had with someone. And like the title of the video says, this conversation does not exist. And the rest of that sentence is, this conversation does not exist in the reality that I want to be in. Basically, I was having a conversation with someone on the phone, and in the middle of it, I literally thought to myself, oh my gosh, if I was being the person who has the best relationship, who has the best life, who's loving their life, whose life is, who's successful, who's living in their perfect house, who's, has the best environment is really doing their thing, is fully in their like element, and if I was the best, highest version of myself, would I be having this conversation? And I literally stopped mid sentence and thought like, no, I would not be having this conversation. And I thought it was a really amazing realization, and something I wanted to bring to you guys, because it's just such an important thing to be able to think about. Especially, let me give you some examples. Like, we'll use the SP example because I was actually talking to my SP at the time, right? So a great example is if you, like, let's bring up some topics. Like, if you're thinking about having a conversation about how they used to be a certain way and now they're not that way anymore, or they used to call you more, or how come you don't bring me flowers anymore, or how come you don't do this thing anymore, or like, what's with this new weird thing you're doing? Like, I don't like this weird way of behaving or whatever. And these types of conversations, if you really think about it, they would literally not exist in the reality where you have your perfect relationship. You're just using relationship as the example here. So in that amazing, beautiful relationship that you are stepping into, that's already done, that you are becoming, that you are training yourself to become with your thoughts, lining up with that perfect relationship, that conversation literally doesn't exist in that relationship. You wouldn't be asking, why don't you call me as much? Or it seems like you're not interested in hanging out as much. Or why, when your dad came to town, it wasn't important for me to come. And I realized when I won't tell you exactly specifically what I was having the conversation about. When I was having that conversation, I thought like, this literally doesn't exist. This problem, this issue, this idea of whatever's wrong was like, this is literally an idea about something being wrong because I'm not in my best reality. I'm not being inside of the best, highest version of me. And it was a major breaking moment where I just thought like, I don't need to be having this conversation. This conversation literally, there's no even need for this conversation in the reality where of course everybody wants to see me, I'm desirable, everybody's always clamoring to call me, talk to me, see what I'm doing, I'm the most important to them. That conversation does not exist in the reality where I'm the most important person to them, right? So it was an eye-opening moment, and all I needed to do was just keep clocking away at just, I'm the most important person, or I'm a major priority, I'm the priority, I'm the most valued, catered to, loved, amazing person to him. He's always wants to see me, all this stuff. And it was just this little tinge that I got, and I thought, I wouldn't even be discussing this if I knew I was valuable and desired. And it brings up the stuff that I'm working on, and we all have we all have things from our childhood, where we were partly neglected, or we had some sort of, I know both my parents worked. My mom was in school, so, and I had other siblings. I may not have got the attention that I needed, and there was, my dad had alcohol. There's a lot of stuff going on that was intense and sort of could give you, and every person I feel like has a number of things that could give you the feeling of neglect or abuse of some kind, right? Or just some sort of like, I'm not good enough, or I'm not loved enough, or whatever. And so a lot of us are working through the same core issues, and when they come up, it's good to notice it and just cover it with an affirmation and move on, and just know that if you were the person in the best life ever, if you were that most highest, best version of you, you wouldn't even be having that conversation. It's such a good way not to waste time, right? And you can really just be like, oh yeah, I don't even have to have that conversation. I can just be the person in my best relationship ever, and I don't need to have that conversation, and it'll clear up on its own. It's literally magic when you just decide who you are and be that person, no holds bar, just be it, and know that you are that person, and you're being your highest best version in your most amazing relationship, with your best house, with your best successful career, all of that. The conversation literally doesn't exist. And that's why I kind of like changed the topic and just got out of the conversation, and then that literally, I'm not kidding, the issue dissolved within a matter of a sleep, an 8-hour sleep cycle or something. It was gone. So it was literally an unnecessary conversation, because it was a conversation in my old reality with my old self, and with the version of my SP that was the old version of him, right? And the other thing I want to say is, if you do entertain those conversations, like let's say you realize, oh no, I am having a conversation that's in my old reality. Like, this is an old issue. This is not me in my best life or with my best relationship. And if you realize that, it's not a big deal. You can literally decide at any moment to be the new you, right? It's not, I mean, you could consider it wasting a little bit of time if you do entertain a conversation like that. But even after, if you realize you were in a conversation that you didn't need to have, or that doesn't exist in your best version of you with the best version of them, when that relationship's amazing, that thing doesn't exist, you can literally just change it right when you realize that, right? So it's really not a big deal if you do entertain the conversation, but it's a good thing to ask yourself, it's a good thing to ask yourself, is this a relevant, conversation for my best relationship? Like, if I was literally living my best relationship with the best version of me and the best version of them, would I even be having this conversation? And oftentimes the answer is no. So I want you to check in with yourself and just ask that question. It'll keep you aligned. It's one of those things that's a trick or a key to keep you aligned, and it's just an epiphany I had the other day. So anyway, let me know how it goes. If you love Neville and you love law of assumption and learning and transforming your life, I'd love to have you, and ring the bell and ring the ding, do the thing. All right, love you guys. Bye. See you next time.